And we saved the best for the last, the ranking member, Senator Sessions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for your patience and your sharing with us your views on the economy. I would just add that there are dangers out there, in my view. We can't always predict them, what they are, and I believe we're running a debt right now at a level so high that it could cause problems that we can't foresee right now. Charles Schwab is not an insignificant figure in American economics, so he's not totally happy with the Fed. And I would say if we'd probably ask you in 2006, did you agree with Rogoff and Reinhart, you probably would have disagreed with that. But sometimes dark prognostications unfortunately come true. So I'm worried about our future from that point of view. You've talked about it, though, very directly, and in your remarks today, the dangers, particularly over a period of years with our entitlements. Do you have any concerns that the size of our debt already presents a threat to our economy, both as some sort of financial crisis that Erskine Bowles predicted in this room could happen within 2 years if we don't make major changes in our financial path, and as to the possibility that the current debt path we're on is lowering now the level of economic growth the country has, if you have concerns with regard to this, would you share with us how something might play out and could be playing out that would be damaging to our economy and or a threat of economic crisis?
Well, Senator, you just pointed out that it's very hard to forecast, and then you asked me to forecast.
Well, basically, you've had forecasts. You basically said you don't foresee any danger in the next few years.
No, I didn't say that. I think.
Well, what would you say the dangers are in the next few years?
I would say the following, which is that my sense, and it's just my sense of markets, is that they're not reacting to the current level of debt. What they are attentive to is the process. In other words, if you think about the downgrade of S&P to the U.S. debt in last summer, what they cited was what they felt was the inability of Congress to actively work together to achieve meaningful reductions in the debt profile. So my sense is, and of course I don't know for sure, but my sense is that a strong demonstration by Congress and the administration that they understand these issues and that they have a plan for attacking them, I suspect would go a long way to maintaining confidence in the bond market. But you know, that's just my judgment.
Well, it's an uncertain world.
Of course.
Do you agree with the idea that Rogoff and Reinhart developed in their book based on empirical data, not their personal views, that when a nation's debt reaches 90% of GDP, that could pull down growth from 1% to 2%. So if it was going to be 3% growth, it would come in at perhaps 2 or lower. Do you think that's a sound theory, or do you reject that?
I don't think there's a fixed number, but I did say in my testimony that as debt gets higher, particularly as the economy gets to full employment, that it'll tend to raise interest rates and crowd out investment and affect productivity growth. So it's certainly a negative. I don't think that was even in their book. I think that was in some separate work that they did. But in any case, I don't think there's a magic number, but certainly the higher the debt to GDP ratio.
What would you consider to be the debt to GDP ratio today? What's the valid?
What is it today? Well, the federal debt held by the public relative to GDP is somewhere around 70%. If you add state and local obligations, it might be closer to 90%. Then you have to ask, how do you deal with unfunded liabilities way out in the future?
You're talking about Social Security, Medicare.
Social Security, Medicaid, it's unfunded, and that would put you over 100%. So there's different ways of looking at it. Certainly, the main concern I have, again, is not the level at a given moment of time, but just the fact that we're on a path that's going to not be sustainable, that's going to, where the amount of debt will cause higher interest rates, which will cause higher deficits, and will continue to, move into the stratosphere, and that has to be addressed before it happens, obviously.
Well, Mr. Rogoff at a coffee shop in Davos last week was quoting the Financial Times. The interviewer said, well, when a state's debt exceeds 90% of GDP, they will reduce economic potential for the country. And then a reporter said, I suggested that the United States is still comfortably short of that level, but I'm swiftly corrected. If you count the federal state debts, crucially, and add in unfunded debts in the Social Security system, the matters you just mentioned, then Rogoff thinks America's debt level is well over 120% of GDP. And their paper that they wrote was indeed based on the most exhaustive study of financial crises in nations ever performed, and that's why it's gotten a good bit of interest. So thank you for sharing with us. I do believe you are correct to advise us that we should move forward with reform on all fronts sooner rather than later. We could perhaps disagree about exactly when we ought to start some of the reductions in spending, but personally I would believe that we shouldn't go a day with inefficient, wasteful government spending. Every bit of that should be eliminated sooner rather than later, and a healthy, lean, productive federal government would be good for the economy also. Thank you, Chairman Bernanke, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. And I hope our permanent chairman feels better soon. Or
We
our
hope, we wish
quasi-permanent
Senator Conrad
chairman.
well, who was beleaguered with an infection today.